Cheerleaders ran in panic. A cheer dad yelled to run. I found my teammates, but chaos erupted again, and I feared a shooter was near. I am a cheerleader on a special needs team, and I will be omitting the names for privacy reasons. We were about to go to warm-ups, taking a team picture before we left. I felt relieved when I recognized my designated spot because I had been concerned about being in the wrong position last time. My coach had reassured me then, but suddenly a group of cheerleaders began screaming and sprinting past us. At that moment, I assumed they were excited to reach warm-ups and intended to ask what had them so happy while feeling confused and amused. However, 3 things happened at once. One of the cheer dads yelled at us to run, and I realized that everyone was not only running but also terrified, which made me aware that something was very wrong. I panicked and attempted to get into the crowd, hoping it would provide me with some shelter. I ran towards a security guard but began to slow down, both because I was searching for members of my cheer team and because I was in shock. Fortunately, another team member found me and instructed me to go with her. Let's refer to her as member 1. She was very calm, so I followed her, even though I felt a bit silly since she is just a teenager. We also discovered 3 more teammates, whom I will call members 2, 3, and 4. We were instructed to move to a more secure area, which resembled a filthy warehouse, where we located our coach. She was on the phone, and I had never seen her so frightened. Normally, she is a very tough cheer coach, but she was crying while speaking on the phone. I later learned it was her dad, and explaining that she had to locate someone because she couldn't run herself. It turned out to be another team member with cerebral palsy and a knee injury. They directed us to navigate over a ledge, similar to a cliff inside a basement, if that makes any sense. I apologize for not knowing how else to describe it. We were all trying to get the coach's attention. Eventually, I grew louder, touched her arm, and told her we needed to go that way. With some assistance, we all made it down. Once we were walking, we were told to hold hands. I took the hand of the woman next to me, mistakenly thinking she was a cheer teammate, although she was not. She laughed and assured me it was all right. As things began to settle down, I reflected on the situation, hoping, as member 1 suggested, that it was just a misunderstanding and that there was no gunfire. Nonetheless, some people were crying, and I reassured them that everything would be okay. But then people began to scream and run again. I thought I heard what sounded like gunfire, resembling pop, pop, pop. We sprinted back, and once again, I lost the hand of the cheerleader and instead grabbed member 2's hand. She started crying and expressed her confusion about what was happening. I felt terrible for her because, although we are both autistic, she has higher support needs than I do. In my mind, I was fearing that there was an active shooter among us, though I refrained from telling her that as it would only frighten her more. She asked if we would be okay, and I told her yes to calm her down, which seemed to help. I panicked again and attempted to leap over a fence-like barrier, but I wasn't skilled enough, so I gave up and ran away with others. Amid the chaos, we lost sight of our cheer coach and her assistant. During the entire crisis, I had a flurry of thoughts in my head. Admittedly, I considered posting about it on True Off My Chest, but I also wondered why on earth a mass shooter would target cheerleaders. Did he have some vendetta against us? I speculated that it might have been similar to the 2017 Las Vegas shooting, where there was no clear motive. He just wanted to cause destruction. Yes, I was aware that we still didn't know the motive, but that incident came to mind. I prayed to God that my dad and my fellow cheer members were safe, especially one of them in a wheelchair. I didn't know her whereabouts, and she couldn't move as quickly as member 1 in her wheelchair. Not her fault. Member 1 is incredibly fast. I felt for my dad because I knew he was protective of me and worried, especially since I had left my phone with him. We weren't allowed to take phones with us for warm-ups, so I was concerned he was terrified and upset about not being able to contact me. When things calmed down a bit, I began to think of jokes to share in our group chat, such as, "The worst thing I initially thought was that we might lose. The worst thing now is actual gunfire." And in the midst of chaos, I still make friends. Since she enjoys making friends with everyone, and while we were walking, she began chatting with other cheerleaders. Once we got outside, things started to calm down again, and I began to feel hopeful that everything would be okay. However, the screaming erupted once more, and I believe I heard that popping sound again. We all ran down toward the bottom of the bridge for shelter. I had sprained my ankle a couple of days earlier, so it was difficult to run up the hill, especially while holding onto member 2. When I reached the bottom, I inadvertently stepped in mud. In my daze, I worried I would ruin my shoes, but I realized it would be fine, thinking I was wearing my regular shoes rather than my cheer shoes. They directed us back up the hill to the fence, and initially I hesitated, believing it was safer down there, not wanting to leave the shelter. Member 2 kept tugging at my arm to encourage me to go up, and eventually I trusted them and ran up again. One cheerleader fell into the mud, and I hesitated to go down to help her, fearing it was unsafe, but I did shout for assistance, and to my relief, she called for help. Once we reached the top, the situation was calm and thankfully remained that way. Member 3 was crying, and the cheerleaders she was conversing with continued to ask her questions to occupy her mind. I joined in and hugged member 3 to comfort her, and she embraced me back. I also hugged another cheerleader who was in tears. I saw the woman who had fallen in the mud, and she appeared to be fine, which relieved me since I was glad she was safe. At one point, I started to space out, reflecting on everything that had transpired that day. Member 1 noticed and told me not to drift off, as she needed me there. I assured her that I was present and not daydreaming. She was doing breathing exercises to calm herself. We were directed again to walk over a bridge. Once we reached the other side, we sat by some buildings. We continued to converse with other cheerleaders and coaches. I once again tried to comfort another cheerleader who was crying alongside her friends. One of the coaches offered to call our parents, though she could only reach member 3 mom since I didn't know my parents' phone numbers. Member 1 always had her phone with her since she hid it, which was fortunate. Over time, member 1 and member 4 dads arrived. Every time I heard someone screaming for their family, I felt anxious because, at that moment, I associated screaming with running and gunfire. However, I thought we were safe since we were no longer near the NCA building. I looked around and saw what appeared to be a police presence. I inquired with the other cheerleaders if they were okay, and they informed me that I was too anxious about my dad. I continued to pray for them in my head. Eventually, my dad arrived, and I expressed my happiness at his presence. Later, member 1 mom showed up, and we sat and discussed everything that occurred, including the helicopter I had seen. I eventually shared my jokes again with them. I mentioned the earlier speculation of the helicopter circling around, incorrectly assuming it was a typical helicopter. I was mistaken. It turned out to be a news helicopter. There was an active news story regarding the incident, so we talked about that. Apparently, 2 cheer parents had gotten into a fight, and there were accusations that they pulled out guns. I remarked, "Nothing says rationality like gunfire." Officially, my dad and member 1 mom insisted there was no gunfire, but I felt the parents would be banned for life, and I felt sorry for the daughters since they would face consequences for their parents' actions. Additionally, phones were buzzing with warnings about avoiding the area, and a cheer performance had been interrupted to facilitate an evacuation. My dad noted how people were traumatized, mentioning he saw one cheerleader with a bent leg. I asked if she would need amputation, and he assured me it wasn't that serious. The youngest cheer member eventually joined us, and we all comforted her while she embraced us. Later, I learned she had been crying for hours. My dad and member 2 decided to walk to our moms. We had come together with member 5. It was a long walk, and my back and ankle were really bothering me. I have a slight case of lumbar scoliosis. There was some confusion, and we had to walk back partway since member 2 mom met us halfway to hug her. We successfully made it back to member 5, and I hugged her while she cried. My mom embraced me and wanted to take a photo. I inquired if it was for anything specific, like our family group text or the prayer team, and she said yes, thinking it might be. I jokingly suggested calling it the "I'm not dead" photo, and she laughed and agreed, later confirming it would be for the group message but possibly also the prayer team, as she said she made it today. On our way home, we read the news story, which mentioned that they believed there was no gunfire, but there was a general consensus among us that gunfire had indeed occurred since more than one person had heard it. Thankfully, no one was killed. My mom stated that even if there was no gunfire, it felt very real to us. I felt anger when I noticed some people online seemed to find it amusing. The fear was palpable, and most individuals present were either teenagers or perhaps both. Even so, it was safer to evacuate than risk the situation not being genuine. When I arrived home, I did additional research. We discussed the incident in the car, but I wanted to read about it myself. There were reports of dads getting into a fight, and the official statement mentioned that the poles being knocked down sounded like gunfire. As I continued to read, I came across information suggesting that one dad had a seizure, which may have also accounted for the noise, or that the music from the cheer routine combined with the fight may have created similar sounds. I was neutral on the subject, but the general consensus within the cheer group remained that it was gunfire since, again, we all heard it, and my dad confirmed he had heard it even from outside. We gathered at a pool where parents could convene to discuss the event. We talked further, mentioning that the NSA would be held in Houston the following year, and Member 5 believed it would be an ongoing issue. Our coach indicated she did not wish to return to the NSA unless there was improved security, which surprised me, considering she was adamant about attending every cheer season, even pushing for our participation in the NCA while I was in Mexico for my brother's wedding. Member 5 indicated that our coach wanted us to wear wristbands or black markers to display our phone numbers. There was even talk within the group about her potentially changing the no phone rule, although that was not confirmed. Member 5 also suspected she may have fractured her big toe when someone stepped on it during our sprint, resulting in severe bruising. There were more comments about the panic and running, but I personally had no issues with that, making it somewhat surprising. Regarding the phone situation, I later informed my mom about it, and she expressed the importance of memorizing both her and my dad's phone numbers since she hadn't realized I didn't know them. We also discussed the cheer competition, with a consensus that everyone would move it to Sunday, except for the special needs teams, which would be canceled. Even if we hadn't been canceled, our coach indicated that we wouldn't participate anyway due to the panic caused by the potential gunfire. We had come in first place on the initial day, so the winning team was declared accordingly, but our coach and her assistant were contesting this, feeling it was unfair since neither their team nor ours were able to compete on the second day. She stated that even if our team had won, she would refuse to accept the award for this very reason. We had a group party planned, and we were concerned that it might be canceled if everyone was too upset. Thankfully, we did not cancel, and it turned out to be enjoyable. Story 2. I stood up to my mom after endless chaos, only to face her anger. I discovered she was lying about seeking help. What a shock. For some context, my 16-year-old, now 17 stepfather, 55 years old, passed away in September 2023 due to a self-inflicted gunshot wound. From that moment onward, my mother, 51, now 52, was never the same. The grief engulfed her entire nervous system, and I felt immense sympathy for her, especially knowing there was nothing I could do except be present and assist around the house. She underwent numerous therapy sessions and even admitted herself to a mental health facility to cope with the loss. She experienced memory issues, had frequent angry outbursts, would talk to herself, and not a single day went by without her crying. Fast forward to the summer of 2024. My close friend Noah, 17, now 18, decided to leave his home, which was only a 4-minute walk away, because it was unstable and unsafe for him. I asked my mother if he could stay with us for a month or two while he sorted through his situation, and she agreed. 1 month turned into 2, 2 into 3, and eventually 3 into 4, and so on. Throughout those months, the atmosphere in our home grew increasingly unstable. My mother's mental health deteriorated further, while Noah's lifestyle was vastly different due to his upbringing. In short, their incompatibility became glaringly obvious. Arguments erupted daily, sometimes initiated by one, sometimes the other, but they always escalated. At one point, my mother borrowed my uncle's old truck, which held significant sentimental value for him as it was his first vehicle. She allowed Noah to drive it to a gas station for a job application, despite him having no license or insurance. Noah ended up getting T-boned, but thankfully emerged with only minor injuries. This incident created a significant rift involving my mother, my uncle, and Noah, with my mother receiving a fine for permitting the drive, and Noah having to attend court a few months later. I'm unsure about the penalties he faced. A few weeks after the accident, chaos reigned in the house. My mother was furious about the untidy state of the home, and she and Noah had a major confrontation. I often intervened in an attempt to diffuse the tension because their fighting felt unnecessary. Despite my mother's repeated requests for me not to intervene, I was exhausted by the constant conflicts. She sent me to my room to continue cleaning, and about 5 minutes later, she entered, upset and raising her voice because I once again tried to mediate. I stood quietly, allowing her to express her frustrations until she finished. She left the room momentarily but returned shortly afterward. I believe I was on my phone at that time, though I can't recall exactly, and as she spotted a water bottle on my spare desk and several cups on my main desk, she exploded, claiming I did nothing around the house, and when I did, it was never done right. My response was, "That's absolutely ridiculous," as I turned to throw something away in the trash. Then she grabbed my arm, spun me around, and gripped my face, shaking my head slightly. She was nearly shouting and spitting while speaking. I can't remember her exact words. After leaving my room and heading to hers, I found myself absolutely furious, shaking, and trying desperately not to cry. About 10 to 15 minutes later, Noah entered and apologized for me being yelled at, expressing regret that my mother transferred her anger onto me, even when I was attempting to broker peace. I recounted the incident of my mother grabbing my face and how she spoke to me, which made Noah very angry. He attempted to leave the room to confront my mother, but I stopped him, pleading with him not to escalate the situation any further that night. Noah's mother then arrived from down the street to collect some money from him. My mother stepped outside to converse with her and proceeded to portray Noah as the only one at fault. Noah became enraged, raising his voice again while his mother sought to calm him down. In the heat of the moment, he shouted, "That's why you put your hands on your son, you horrible person." My internal reaction was one of shock. I walked out of my room to hear my mother respond, "Oh, really? Are you so hurt? Do I need to call the police for you?" All while feigning concern and making a theatrical pouty face. She instructed me to pack some things, stating that I was not allowed to stay at home for the night, and drove me to my friend Ethan's house. During the journey, we got into a fierce argument, with her threatening to make my life miserable. I countered by saying she already made it unbearable and called her psychotic. A few days later, I returned home to find Noah had moved out, leaving a tense atmosphere between my mother and me. She traveled all the way to San Antonio for a therapy appointment, and on her way back, chose to spend a few days with a friend. The following week mirrored the previous one, except that this time she didn't stay with that friend, as her car broke down and she was stranded far away for about a week and a half waiting for a part. Eventually, her car mysteriously started, and she returned home. By then, I had only seen her 2 or 3 times in a month. A week after her return, she decided to admit herself to a trauma care facility for 2 weeks. During the past month, I discovered she was in contact with her ex-boyfriend, who had been a terrible person addicted to drugs, dealing drugs, and made my life hell in 5th grade. He was also the reason my stepfather had attempted to take his own life the first time through a drug overdose, stemming from my mother seeing him while she was divorcing my stepfather. My stepfather loved my mother dearly and was unaware of Quincy until one day when he unexpectedly visited, and Quincy opened the door. I don't know what transpired then, but my stepfather went home and attempted suicide. He survived after 6 months in the hospital with only a 2% chance of living. When I discovered my mother was back in contact with her ex, I was filled with rage but refrained from discussing it. Eventually, I began receiving Cash App notifications on my phone from my mother's email, showing money transfers back and forth between her and her ex, all while she was supposed to be in a trauma care facility. The messages attached to these transactions were quite explicit, proving she was lying and was indeed with her ex, not seeking treatment. I felt lost, realizing I had been deceived and manipulated into believing she was pursuing help. I was fearful for her safety, questioning whether she was using drugs, so I sent screenshots of every transaction and message to family members. The total amount was around $2,500, the equivalent of our unpaid rent, while she had no job or stable income. When my family confronted her, she went into a frenzy, creating a group chat with relatives and airing all their secrets and past mistakes. I must also mention that during her absence in San Antonio, she forgot my birthday. A week later, she returned home and treated me like garbage, screaming in my face that she was furious with me for causing the situation and wanting me out of the house. In the following 2 weeks, I made plans with my family to move in with my grandmother, but had yet to inform my mother. She found out through a couple of church friends and was understandably furious, attempting to kick me out before I was prepared to move. At one point, she even called the police on me for spending the night at a friend's house. Fast forward to the present day, I have been living with my grandmother for about a month and a half. I've tried to maintain contact with my mother, but she has ignored most of my messages and limited our conversations to a bare minimum. One night, while staying at a friend's house with my grandmother out of town, my mother texted me that she had dropped the dogs off in my grandmother's backyard at 12:30 in the morning. No warning, no consultation. She simply left them there. We exchanged messages, and she claimed she was traveling to different states. Currently, she has no job or income and was kicked out of her house for failing to pay rent. I suspect she has been with her ex-boyfriend. A few days ago, I made her come to retrieve her dog while I kept mine. When she arrived, she had her ex on the phone with the speakerphone on, and when I spoke, he asked who was on the line. My mother dismissed my presence, saying it was just me and not to worry. She hugged me, professed her love for me, and then drove away with her dog. Below are some text messages from today and yesterday. My mother. It's a very sad day. I gave Harley back to his breeder. My life is a storage unit. My family has walked away. You said I was psychotic when I'm not. Was it because you were mad at me for yelling at Noah? I had never even yelled at you like that. I'm at a loss regarding why you behaved this way. Why must you send my belongings to family? I'm more broken now. Who would have thought this would help me? I'm absolutely alone with nowhere to call home. I miss you. I miss Dad. I miss our life. I love you so very much. Me. I apologize for calling you psychotic. I shouldn't have said that, and I regret it. You aren't psychotic, but you are definitely not mentally well. I know you realize that. I didn't say that merely because you yelled at Noah. I informed him about you grabbing my face, not to paint myself as a victim, but just to share what happened. He mentioned it during your argument, and then you fake cried to me, asking if you needed to call the police for me. That was wrong, truly wrong. Yes, I cursed at you. Yes, I was angry and disrespectful, and I'm sorry for that. However, I stand firm in my decision to seek help from family because I believed you were not at a trauma care facility, and I was scared. As your child, I owe you nothing. I don't owe you questions or explanations. I had no obligation to inquire with you instead of going to family for assistance. If I believe you are lying about being at a trauma care facility, why would I ask you? I wouldn't trust your answer if I suspected you were deceitful from the start. I approached family with no intention of ruining your life or distancing them from you. Initially, we all aimed to help you. Your actions, not ours, drove us away. The group chat you created to expose everyone's private matters was harmful. I didn't intentionally snoop through your emails. I noticed notifications that alarmed me, which led me to investigate further. Mom, you need to find a job, secure a stable income, and seek help a psychologist, therapist, or admission to a mental health facility to address your issues and rediscover your motivation. I love you and care about you. You are my mother, and that will never change. My mother. So you outed me and moved out because you think I lied. I grabbed your face for cursing at me, and I need a job. All you had to do was call me and discuss it. Was it rude for all of you to talk about my issues? Why can't anyone see that? I know I need a job. I'm aware of what's wrong with me, and of course, I will continue my therapy. Fine, if you think these are valid reasons to move out and to treat me without care or concern, then okay. Am I the antagonist? Story 3. My ex broke up with me, and we agreed to stay friends, but I became so heartbroken by everything she's done to me. I don't know what to do to get over this. I, 21-year-old female, recently discovered my ex-girlfriend's 20-year-old female Reddit account, and it left me feeling utterly heartbroken. For context, we began our relationship in April 2023, but in July, she informed me that she would be moving to Germany to work as an au pair, looking after 2 small children. The idea of a long-distance relationship shattered me, but having already fallen for her, I reluctantly consented to give it a shot. During the period from July to February, we encountered numerous difficulties, yet I found myself happier than ever. I flourished in my friendships, my studies, and our relationship. However, just before Valentine's Day in February 2024, she called to express her desire to extend her stay in Germany for another year. During our conversation, she also suggested the possibility of breaking up. Although I wished to continue our relationship, I could feel her hesitance about remaining together. She repeatedly stated, "I can sense you are not happy, and I know you didn't want to do long distance. I don't want to hold you back." It seemed as though she was looking for a reason to end things. Ultimately, I felt compelled to agree, fearing I wouldn't be able to wait for her return, a return I suspected she might keep postponing. In her post, she mentioned, "I knew we would end up breaking up, and we did. It was heartfelt and lovely, the best breakup I could have asked for, even though it hurt." That remark struck me profoundly. How could she perceive it as the best breakup when I was left despondent? After our separation, my life spiraled downward. I began drinking heavily, struggled to sleep, refused to eat, and ultimately faced significant weight loss. By the end of April, I flunked out of school after missing a critical exam due to illness. I felt as though I had ruined everything in my life, burdened by both my relationship and academic failures. I spoke about her incessantly, to the point where my friends became weary of her name. 2 or 3 months after the breakup, she called me while intoxicated and asked if we would still be together if she returned home. I replied affirmatively because I still loved her. What hurts the most, however, is her comment concerning her decision not to remain for another year. She posted, "Recently, I talked to my ex while drunk, bad move, I know, and asked her if I came home in July, would we be together, and she said, yeah, probably." I do love my ex. She was my first proper, real relationship, and we were friends for years, classic lesbian situation. But after 3 months apart and dating Flo, 22-year-old female, I don't know if I can go back and start dating again, and now I'm afraid to tell her that I'm coming home in case she thinks we would automatically get back together. But now June is getting closer and closer, and I'm worried about not telling her. So, would I be the one at fault? Why did she call me while drunk and provide me with false hope if she was uncertain about rekindling our relationship? We had agreed to remain friends, so I cannot comprehend why she would feel hesitant about communicating this. Instead, I now feel misled and betrayed. To complicate matters further, her post was dated May 8, 2024, almost 3 months post-breakup. And if she was dating Flo during that time, it implies she likely had other options available to her after our separation. I had a nagging feeling that she might have been interested in someone else when she broke up with me, but I had hoped I was merely being paranoid. The thought that she may have pursued someone new while I remained loyal to her devastates me. Throughout the summer, I attempted several times to meet up, as we were meant to be friends. Despite her not informing me about her return, I learned through social media. I even called her at the beginning of summer, and she seemed happy to chat. However, after that, she began to brush me off and even matched with my friend on dating apps and tried to message her on other platforms, which I recently discovered. Apparently, she didn't realize we attended high school together when they matched. As summer came to a close, she moved to another province for school, having dropped out of our university. I felt adrift, clinging to the hope from our conversation about possibly reconciling while receiving no clear communication from her. The complications did not end there. In November, I visited her campus, and we had an incredible time together. It felt magical, and when we kissed, I allowed myself to believe it signified something special. Yet, doubts persisted in my mind. She had alluded to something deeper between us. For instance, her move to the province I visit 2 or 3 times a year seemed like a fortuitous coincidence. I have family there and have contemplated moving back due to my recent struggles with mental health, but that's another story. Additionally, her school offers a program I am interested in, so relocating wouldn't be an irrational choice for me. I left before we could discuss everything, but I asked her if I could see her over the Christmas break, and she agreed. Unfortunately, during Christmas, I felt distant from her again. She hardly appeared to be on her phone, barely responding to my messages and calls, and despite several attempts to connect, we never ended up seeing each other. Seeking clarity, I reached out to her on New Year's Day, expressing how deeply I still love her and my determination to make our relationship work, even with the distance. I mentioned that I would be moving to her city and that I did not want to be with anyone else. She replied candidly, saying, "I won't lie and say I just want to be friends because I don't. I want us to be more than that. But the reality is we are provinces apart. Maybe we should just remain friends for now, at least until our circumstances change. I love you, but I can't put us both through that again. My feelings for her remain intense, and I genuinely hope we could be together someday or at least maintain a friendship. However, learning that she has been avoiding me for months and discussing our situation elsewhere instead of with me has been excruciating. I keep thinking how much heartache could have been avoided with a bit more clarity. Although many of my friends believe she is in the wrong, that perspective offers me little solace. As I prepare to move provinces this year and possibly transfer to her university, I cannot shake my anxiety about everything. I also find myself questioning her capacity to maintain a healthy relationship of any kind with me. I was contemplating visiting her next week while I am on break to see my family, but I am conflicted about whether to proceed. Perhaps it would be wiser for me to step away from her life entirely. It feels as if she does not care about me as deeply as I care for her, and I am deeply hurt by it all. I wish she could at least love me half as much as I love her.